Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 70 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we took a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment, a couple early dinosaurs, a couple quite famous ones, and we've got another crocodilian, which I'm always excited to talk about. So let's get started. So we're going to go right to the beginning of the Jurassic, to the Jurassic, with Hockow1215 giving us Unasaurus. So let's have a look at these cool little guys, little friends. So let's have a look at you, little friend. So this is Unasaurus. So Unasaurus is a group of Unasaurid sauropodomorphs, so a really early relative of modern sauropods, herbivorous dinosaurs as well. So Herrerasaurus is quite well preserved. It's quite complete, almost complete skull, complete with lower jaw, and a partial skeleton with a juvenile specimen being complete. It's actually one of these most complete dinosaurs coming from Brazil. So the original fossils were found in the southern Brazil state of Rio Grande do Sul, in the city of San Amaro, recovered from the Calitura Formation, which is geographically very similar to like the late Jurassic. So it's similar old dinosaurs like Saturnalia, which have been found there, and along with finds from Argentina, like Eoraptor, that suggests these dinosaurs may have actually originated in that kind of area, which is quite interesting. So in 2004, this guy was described, and described the holotype specimen, new genus and species. The generic name Unasaurus comes from the word Une, which means black water for the local language, and then in turn refers to the Portuguese name for the region where the fossils are found, Agua Negra, so black water. And the scientific name or specific name is Tolentori, which is to honor Talento Mafriga, who actually found the fossils on the side of the road in 1998. So, like most early dinosaurs, Unasaurus was relatively small and walked on two legs. So this was a far cry from bigger extinct relatives like Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, and Patagoniotype and things like that. It was only about 2 meters long, or 2.5 meters long, about 8 feet long, 70 to 80 centimeters, or 2.3 to 2.6 feet tall at the hip, and weighed about 70 kilograms, or 150 pounds, though there was recently in 2023 a juvenile specimen found. So upon its initial description, it was referred to the group Plateosauridae. So under this was actually a little bit weird, because we didn't really know much about sauropodomorphs at that time. So its closest relatives actually wouldn't have come from South America. It would have been actually come from Germany, with being closely related to things like Plateosaurus, which is much more famous. But in 2018, they did a big revision of all the different early sauropodomorph taxa, and now they've made their own clade Unasauridae, named after this guy. That includes Macrocolum and Jacopelosaurus, which was found in Brazil as well. So we have a much better idea of these guys. So during the time this guy lived, he lived during the Carnian-Tenorian age of the late Jurassic, between 225 and 200 million years ago. Found in South Brazil, and at the time was actually connected to Africa, which was under Pangaea, but just starting to split into Laurasia in the north, which included Europe, Asia, and North America, and then the south it included Antarctica, Australia, Zealandia, Africa, and South America. So it's just splitting back then. And actually puts us at more famous formations like the Ijolgasho Formation, which is 10 million years younger than these guys, so kind of up there with some of the earliest formations, so we get a really good idea of what the first dinosaurs were starting to look like. So the Calitura Formation is quite a wide variety of fauna, all sorts of dinosaur forms, so early relatives of dinosaurs, like the Teleosaurus Herrerasaurus and the sauropodomorph Gobellosaurus canarensis, also big diectodonts and phytosaurs, and there's also a big streptosondal amphibian. Also lots of small tetrapods like the proclionid Sorturna caldon, also Lepidosaurs and sphenodonts, Clevosaurus, which is a relative of the modern Tuatara, potentially maybe even a early pterosaur, Phaxopterus minima, which is quite interesting, and then a few other therapsids and weird things, because the Jurassic is such an underrated time in world's history. All sorts of really funky animals living around there. Really, really cool. So, next up, Let you run off and do your thing. Next up, we've got a big guy here. So this one is done by NetRaptor, returning again, and Castle Cog for thank you guys for putting in the game. We've got Magnapolia. It's the wonderful guy, Magnapolia. Let's see if we can get one in a good... Oh, you look good to me, so let me just... There we are. Earlier in the sunlight. There we are. Let's look at you, Mr. Magnapolia. So Magnapolia is a genus of Lambeosaurian hadrosaur from the latest Cretaceous of Baja California, northwestern Mexico. So between 1968 and 1964, a team of the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, which was headed by geologist William J. Morris, found a large lambeosaur near El Rostado in Baja California. It was originally named as a Lambeosaurus lachinensis, based on the type specimen, which is a partial skull, and they kind of thought it may be something else, but this is kind of what we're giving it at the moment. That we don't know what its gender it is. But they thought it was most likely to be Lambeosaurus. The specific name it was given, which means a latus is broad and cauda means tail, so basically it's broad tail. As you can see, it does have quite a broad tail. And it was actually originally interpreted as being adaptations for swimming, as having like a big paddle-like tail to swim. And there was also injury on the thigh bone that the researchers believed that it couldn't have healed if it was walking around all the time. Though that's probably not true. It was just another thing as well. But between about 1981 to 2012, there were debates whether it was Pachysaurus, which is another close relative, things like Lambeosaurus, or even question if it was its own thing. But luckily, 2012, it was named as a separate genus, Magnapolia. So Magnus means large in Latin, and the first name of Paul Hara Jr., who is the president of the Board of Trustees at the Los Angeles County Museum of Natural History. So that gave us a pretty good idea of... it was actually its own genus, so that sorted it out. And the 2012 study found it was found in the layer of the Gallo Formation during the latest Campanian, so between 73.6 to 73 million years ago. And there's been other specimens found of various different ages with skin impressions and things like that, so we do have a pretty good idea of Magnapolia and what it looks like, which is pretty cool. So what sets Magnapolia apart from other hadrosaurs and things like that? It is kind of notable for its great size, which you'd be happy to hear. And its tall profile, as you can see, of its tail, very, very tall tail, which had elevated chevrons and vertical spikes like those of a Pachysaurus, which is a relative. Its size was originally estimated to be between 15 and 16 meters, so between 49 to 54 feet, and with a body mass up to 8 tons. But recently that's been shrunk a bit, but it's still at about 12 meters long, about 41 feet, which still makes it one of the largest, if not the largest, ornithischians, up there with Centrosaurus and Albertosaurus and ectans and things like that, so that's pretty cool. So in terms of its classification, it was originally described as a mentioned Lambeosaurus and close relative to that, but in 2012 this cladistic analysis actually clarified a lot about it. So Magnapolia is actually a close relative of Velafrons, which is also from Mexico, and that's its sister species, and they form a separate southern clade of southern North American, or south, or we'll say Central America because it's from Mexico, Central American kind of dinosaurs or Lambeosaurs. And then you have a clade that has more Northern Asian and North American relatives, or North American. So things like Corythosaurus, Lambeosaurus, Pachysaurus, and Lauratitan. So it really tells you a lot about their relationships, which is quite interesting. So yeah, really, really cool. Definitely do love these guys. NetRaptor always does a great job, giving us some wonderful mods. So we're going to let you run off and do your thing, hopefully. Okay, so next up we have got by Master Dude, always returning. We've got a lot of mods from Master Dude today. We have got Saurolophus. We got Saurolophus, very, very interesting dinosaur. Saurolophus, which means lizard crest. So let me find one that's kind of standing in the light. And it does that again. Okay. Let's see if we can find you. I know, you look perfectly positioned to talk about. I like you. So Saurolophus, which means lizard crest, these guys are a genus of hadrosaurid dinosaur from the late Cretaceous of Asia and North America. So it lived in the Horseshoe Canyon and the Namek Formation. There's two different species, and actually one of the few dinosaur genera actually known from multiple continents, which is quite interesting. So this guy was first discovered by Barnum Brown in 1911, and the specimen was a nearly complete skeleton, and it was actually one of the first nearly complete skeletons, or the first nearly complete dinosaur skeletons from Canada. And the rocks it was found in was from the Upper Cretaceous Horseshoe Canyon, so found near the Red Deer River in Alberta. And Saurolophus was kind of the basis for a lot of interesting dinosaur names. So you can see there's Prosaurolophus, which means before Saurolophus, and Parasaurolophus, which means near Saurolophus. So that's where a lot of dinosaurs got their name from Saurolophus, all the way back then. But then there were more abundant remains found in Asia. So there was a lot of research looking into these guys around from the Namek Formation, about the same age as well. So between 1946 and 1949, the Russian-Mongolian paleontological expeditions recovered a bunch of different specimens of the other species of the Namek Formation. And this is one is much more well known. There's about 15 different specimens with all sorts of different growth stages, which is really, really interesting. So I'll explain the differences between the two species. So the two different species, there is the type species, which is Saurolophus osborni and Saurolophus agronensis, I believe you say that. So osborni was the first one found. It was found from a complete skull and skeleton, two other complete skulls and other skull fragments. And then the Namek one, agronensis, is known from about at least 15 different specimens. So the main way you can tell them apart is some details on the skull, as well as different patterns on their skin impressions, because we have pretty good skin impressions from this guy, but also their size. So the Namek one was much larger, as we'll get into. So the main way you can tell them apart is also the distinctive row of, you can see these rectangular scales down the midline. So this guy is based on the Namek one. And also the scales actually suggest that the Namek one has much more of a striped pattern, while Osborni, the American one, has much more of like a mottled or spotted pattern. So that's another way to tell them apart. And there has been some not really much synapomorphies and things like that. So if someone wanted to study that, you can make it better clear within the different species. May even put them as different genera eventually, or lump a lot more animals, because I think it's kind of weird. I'm a bit of a lumper when it comes to dinosaurs, to be honest. Because, we have animals around multiple continents of the same genera, but it's weird that dinosaurs don't. I digress. It's slightly subjective, so I digress. So, as I mentioned, they're all pretty known from pretty well good specimens. So, the Albertian species, osborni, was about 8.2 to 8.5 meters, or about 27, 28 feet long, with a meter-long skull, and was estimated to be about 3 tons, while the Mongolian species was larger, got about 13 meters, about 33 feet, with potential of larger specimens being found, and weighed up to 11 tons, with the largest skull of the species measuring about 1.2 2 meters. And other than size, they're pretty much identical, with some major changes in patterning, so there is some should be some more study there. But I can see they're really interesting. They've got this crest, so it's really weird. It is present in younger individuals, but it develops a lot more as they age. We have a pretty good idea of their autogeny. So this crest was hollow, very much similar to Parasaurolophus and a lot of other animals. So this is believed to be, there was lots of research looking into originally what it was, like snorkels, all sorts of different things. But most recent analyses suggest that these guys were using them as kind of a resonating chamber to make louder and more complex calls, which is really, really cool, especially for display. In terms of where it fits on the family tree, it was originally put at the Saurolophine. It included corythosaurus and Apacrosaurus, but now there's lots of changes in the tree. Then the group Saurolophini, which is Saurolophine, they're more closely related to things like Prosaurolophus and Cubanosaurus. A little bit later on the family tree, a little bit after Edmontosaurus, a little bit before things like Courtonosaurus and Segnosaurus. So a little bit of changes there. Not too different in terms of ecology like other hadrosaurids. They had big beaks, eating a lot of plants, and dental batteries that allowed them to destroy plants, things like that. And the crest, as I mentioned, would have been very likely used. There's been suggestions for muscle attachments, things like that, but most likely they were resonating chambers for sound, so they could produce much more complex calls. We have a pretty good idea of the ontogeny and social behavior, so we found juveniles pretty much right from babies up to adults. And it seems that these guys changed a lot. They had the crest when they were babies, but it became much more developed as they got older. There's a chart if you want to look up the cradle ontogeny of these guys on the Wikipedia that I recommend. So it shows you how they grew. And then these have been found in large bone beds of herds, which are just one species with different size, so juveniles, subadults, and adults. So it makes sense that at least we have evidence in this species that they were gregarious. So the other species, Osborni, may have been social as well, but we don't know because we only have the one specimen. But if you look at genera today, there are some animals like bison. If you look at like Bos, some are more herd-like, some live more in herds, some are more solitary. It really just depends. Even lions are a great example. Lions and tigers, they're in the same genus, but tigers, like to live alone, and lions like to live in prides. So it's really hard to extrapolate more than just that particular species. And actually looking at the sclerotic rings, or the rings around their eyes, it actually suggests that these guys would have been active throughout the day, very similar to most other large modern herbivores like cows and elephants and things like that. But yeah, we also have some evidence of pathologies on these guys. So we have one from the Nemecta Formation that looks like it was bitten by a Tarbosaurus, and it was likely either scavenging on it or potentially like that shows more ecology about how they would eat prey, so that's quite cool. But the paleo environments they lived in, Osborni lived in the later parts of the Horseshoe Canyon, with the Western Interior Seaway dividing America in two, pretty much. Lived with all sorts of really cool dinosaurs like Parkosaurus and Odontosaurus, Struthiomimus, Atrociraptor, Albertonicus, and Albertosaurus, and also things like Archaeceratops and Edmontosaurus regalis, so lots of really cool animals. And then Nemecta Formation, what really set this apart, there was a lot more sauropods in the Nemecta Formation. So there were things like Barosbaldia, Homocephaly, Prenocephalae, Sakiae, Nemectosaurus, Mononicus, Zanzibar, which was a troodontid, bunch of different oviraptorosaurs, also Dinochirus and Therizinosaurus, and also Tarbosaurus. So very, very rich formation. So yeah, really, really cool animal. I definitely love to see this guy. So we'll let you run off and do your thing. So what do we got next? Next up, we've got another one done by Master Doot. Hopefully you run out. So next we've got Centrosaurus. So here we've got Centrosaurus. Let's have a look at you. You look quite pretty standing there. We'll take advantage of that. So, Centrosaurus, which means pointed lizard. They're a genus of Centrosaurine ceratopsian from the Campanian. So the first specimens of these guys were described by paleontologist Lawrence Lambie from the Red Deer River in Alberta. And name means pointed lizard, but it doesn't actually refer to the big the big nose horn there. It actually refers to a lot of these little oscillacles on the skull here, and all these like little spikes on the frill, so they got very pointed. Actually didn't refer to the nasal horn, because it actually was not unknown in that species during the time. And it's actually very, very well known because we have vast bone beds of Centrosaurus in Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta, and some of them are hundreds of meters and contain thousands of individuals of all ages and levels of completion. So it's somewhat speculated why this has been. Maybe it could have been like how wildebeest migrate. A lot of them died in floods and then were preserved. Some suggest it may be coming around a waterhole. Whatever the reason, we do have all these specimens here, and we do have a pretty good idea of what Centrosaurus would have looked like. And there's been some debate whether it was different species and things like different genera, especially with like Styracosaurus and Monochlorus. And there's some evidence of PT6 dimorphism. And there was two species. The species that we have now is Centrosaurus apericus, which was described by Lambie in 1904. But in 2012, there was a close relative described as Coronosaurus, which is quite interesting. So Centrosaurus itself is quite a large dinosaur, though not as large as its relatives. It's quite big for a ceratopsian, reaching about 5 meters or 5.5 meters long, or 16 to 18 feet, and weighed about 2 to 2.5 metric tons. So quite a big animal. And like other Centrosaurines, and this is kind of a defining trait for Centrosaurines, they had this very, very large central horn on their nose there. And they also had, like, actually not that big a frill compared to most other ceratopsians. but you could see they also grew to about half a meter in like the biggest adults. And as they look solid, they actually, most ceratopsians, other than things like Triceratops, they actually had large holes or fenestrae in their frills, which, as we'll get into, probably didn't help if they wanted to use them as weapons. So the genus Centrosaurus was named, gives the name to the Centrosaurian family that includes animals like Pachyrhinosaurus, Avaceratops, Albertoceratops, and Dinosaurs. So this kind of differentiates them from the Chasmosaurines, which have the 3 horns. These guys are kind of like the 1 horn, and there's a bunch of different species within that. It's still really cool regardless. So very similar to other types of ceratopsians, big beaks to break into part matter and be able to share them up. And because of these big bone beds, it's thought they were gregarious or herd-living animals, but we really don't know. We just know a lot of animals died together. They could have been migrating, could have been around a waterhole and just collected together, things like that. But these large horns and frills, a lot of people think initially, oh, they're big stabby things to kill predators. But actually, it seems like there was actually a study in 2009 that looked at the injuries on the skull and things like that. And it actually shows that these guys may have most likely actually injured each other. So they would have used them the same way like antelope and deer use their horns and antlers today. So using them to fight each other, most likely for mates. And then these crests, obviously the frill was also big as well, most likely for displays, not really good for defending against predators though. I'm sure if they needed to, they could use it against a predator, but most likely for displays, of course. So really, really interesting, these guys are. Also, we actually have a specimen that has cancer. It's got osteosarcoma in the right fibula. And this seems to have actually been quite aggressive cancer, and actually was actually impeding the animal in life. It would have probably died not so long after if it didn't die in the bone beds, getting washed away in the floods or however it died. But luckily, being in a herd would have actually protected this guy, and being able to live, it could still look out for predators and hide within the herd, giving it more protection to kind of allow it to get to that stage. So, and actually one of the few specimens that had bone cancer, so really tells us a lot about dinosaurs' ecology and biology, things like that. So they still got cancer and got sick, just like the rest of us, which is a little bit sad, but it does tell us a lot about these guys, about how they live their lives. But yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to let you run off and do your thing. Master Dude did another wonderful job with that one. I think we're going to have to skip at these guys a little bit. They're definitely coming in front of my... I just don't like that they like to hang around the... Alright, I think we better do it now. So this is by Hockow1215. We've got Segnosaurus. And see, that's exactly what I was worried about. Anyway, we'll have a look at you since you are standing in a nice position for me. So this is Segnosaurus. So these guys are a genus of Herrerasaurus that lived in what is now southeastern Mongolia during the late Cretaceous. There's been multiple well-preserved specimens found in the Gobi Desert, as we'll get into. So as I mentioned, 1973, first discovered, found in the Bistahieversor Formation in the Gobi Desert. Lots of other specimens have been found. It is quite well known, so we do have a pretty good idea of what this guy looked like as well. So this guy was a large-bodied Therizinosaur, probably one of the larger ones, up there with Ceratosaurus. So it's estimated to be about 6 to 7 meters, or 20 to 23 feet long, and weighed about 1.3 tons. Though some estimates more recently have actually put it up, so it's about 4 tons. So it's incompletely known, but we do have a general idea of like what anatomy is for Therizinosaurs. So they would have had a bipedal body with robustly thick trunks, and with a truck with a big pelvis that allows them to have more space for their guts to help digest plants. They also had a beak with lots of little teeth to help them break through plants as well. Long, slender neck, but also large arms and claws. Not quite as extreme as Therizinosaurus, but you could tell they'd probably use them for either grasping at branches or defending themselves against predators, most likely. We also know, because of its relatives, such as Albertosaurus, was feathered, and a lot of these anatomical features were adaptations for becoming more herbivorous. There's actually a lot of convergence with early sauropodomorphs and a lot of their anatomy as they were getting bigger and eating plants. So it actually led to them to originally started to believe they were like late surviving prosauropods, or as they were known at the time, but now they're considered sauropodomorphs. But then we found they're actually much more closely related to Maniraptora, so that includes animals such as, the raptors and birds today. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, very interesting anatomy in that regard. And I mentioned his classification, originally thought to be those really weird, even all of the Mimosaur, we didn't know where they fit in the family tree, but then we actually finally figured out, and they are a member of Maniraptora, as we have a much more better idea of how their bodies looked, how their bodies looked, and we got more anatomy from all sorts of different species, ranging from Falcurius to all the way to Bistahieversor and Nemectosaurus and Nemengosaurus and there's Dinosaurs, of course. So we do have a pretty good idea. So it was really considered these guys were amphibious. They were given that name, Segnosaurus, which is like Segnosaurus, which means slow lizard. But there was proposed they could be amphibious, but like most dinosaurs, they probably weren't amphibious. And there actually was lots of anatomy looking into them and compared them a lot to calicotheres and ground sloths in their ecology. So eating kind of mid to high brows, using their arms to potentially pull down branches for them to eat, things like that. Also gorillas as well. And there's been studies looking at their brain cases. So they had a well-developed sense of smell, hearing, and balance, which is thought to be almost like a holdover from their early relatives that were much more carnivorous. So they still kept that as they became herbivores. And we do have they have lots of adaptations for highbrows and things like that. We don't know exactly what the claws were for. There were some people that thought they were much more like anteaters eating like termites, but most likely they were big, large herbivores. And they also found dinosaur eggs from the same formation that belonged to a therizinosaur. Probably not Segnosaurus itself, but very possible it could be. So they were found in association with hatchlings, and the hatchlings were considered precocial, so they're pretty much ready to go right out the egg. They can feed themselves, run around, do their own thing. Unlike a lot of baby birds that need their parents to protect them, they didn't really need that. They're just small. They're just small version of the adults, able to run around, and they could leave the nest and feed alone away from the adults. And actually showed these guys were colonial nesters. So there's within about a 50-meter area, or about an area of 22 by 52 meters, quite a big area. These guys would have been breeding together with all sorts of different clutches. So very much like hadrosaurs and titanosaurs and sauropodomorphs, they would have likely been in that area. And it seems they didn't return to that area, so they seem to make a new nest every year, potentially, which is quite interesting. As I mentioned, there's been lots of research thinking people it was a lot more of an anteater or eating ants or termites, but now it's considered to be much more of a giant ground sloth or a calicothere in terms of its ecology, which is quite cool. And in terms of the paleo environment it was found in, fossils of Segnosaurus have been covered from the Biao Formation, which is from the 102 to 86 million years ago, which is from the Cenomanian to Tenorian, so a little bit earlier than a lot of other famous dinosaurs. And it was actually quite big too, it's like second only to Therizinosaurus. And it's a very, the formation itself it lived in was very much like meandering rivers in a semi-arid climate with lots of plains, so quite wet. So it lived with all sorts of different animals. It lived with other therizinosaurs, so some smaller ones, such as Herrerasaurus and Emergosaurus, and even another one, so there was a lot of niche partitioning between those guys. This guy was the biggest, so probably was the highest browser. All other animals it lived with was the Tyrannosaur, Electrosaurus, Gradromimus, which is all the Mimosaur, Achillobeta, I've covered this before, he's a Dromaeosaur, also Talururus, Globohadrus, which was an Ankylosaur and a Hadrosaur. Also got the sauropod Urkerna and Gracoceratops, which is Ceratopsian, and all sorts of different crocodilians and all sorts of invertebrates and turtles and things like that, freshwater mollusks that it lived with. So quite a rich, productive ecosystem, enough to sustain lots of big animals like this. So yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan of this guy. I love Hockal's mods. Really nice to see some new things as well. Really, really cool. So we're going to let you run off. So next up, we have got this guy is another one done by Hockal1215. We've got Styracosaurus. So this is a cool little guy. We'll just let them run out a little bit so I can get a good look at them in the light. We won't worry about the people because the people suck. Let's have a look at one with a nice color. This one's got the extra color patterns as well, so if you want that, we'll have a look at you because you got nice colors on you. I like this gray, fits well. So this is a Herrerasaurid. Its main name means southern cross lizard. Herrerasaurid from the late Jurassic of Brazil in the Santa Maria Formation. So these guys were a small and agile bipedal predator, coming from the late Carnian to early Neurian stage, so about 100, 225 million years ago. Makes it one of the earliest dinosaurs known, so we know a really cool another Jurassic animal. So it measured about 2.2 to 2.25, or about a little over 7 feet long, and lower estimates even put it just over 2 meters, and had a body mass estimate of about 12 kilograms. So it's not very much well known, but most of its anatomy has kind of been reconstructed from Herrerasaurus. It would have been a small predator and had teeth that were serrated and pulled back, so that means they could hold and prey or tear flesh as needed. And the tail is also really long, so that would have been good stabilizing for when it was running around and leaping, which is also quite cool. So its discovery, its name means Southern Cross, which is actually a star constellation in the southern hemisphere where it was obviously found, in lizard, which means Saurus, like Saurus lizard, and the specific name is named Pricey, in honor of Colbert's fellow paleontologist Linwell Ivor Price, which is pretty cool. So the first known specimen of Centrosaurus came from the paleontological site JWE2 in the Santa Maria Formation, which is found in that area, and then the genus name refers to Southern Cross, as I mentioned. And we already mentioned that. So it seemed it may not have been that common in its environment, and they could have just lived in an environment where fossils aren't very often found. But yeah, really cool. So Herrerasaurids themselves are a little bit confusing on where they fit in the dinosaur family tree. They're sometimes considered early theropods, they're sometimes considered early theropods, or they split off as their own group before cephalopods and sauropods became their own things. So it's a little bit confusing where they exactly fit, but we still know that they are Saurischians, so they are related to Saurischian dinosaurs, as I mentioned, sauropods and things like that. So we do have a little bit of a better idea where they fit on the family tree. Closely related to things like Herrerasaurus and Dinosaurus and also Eoraptor as well, so it's kind of some of their relatives. So it seems these guys were small, agile predators, kind of like mid-level in their niche, so they would have been feeding on cynodonts and rhynchosaurs and also synapsids, small things. And they lived in a pretty rich environment as well. So during the late Jurassic, these guys would have really been middle of the road in the ecosystem, almost like a jackal or a small like dog-like thing, you could say, just mid-size within the ecosystem. There were lots of large Rarasuchians, very similar to Postosuchus, like Rahunosuchus, which were the top predators, the T-Rex of their times. And then there were also all different types of different rhynchosaurs and Dicynodonts, which kind of took the large herbivore niches. Also, there was Aedosaurs, which almost looked like walking pig crocodiles, and also early sauropodomorphs, some other early dinosaurs as well, and also Eoraptor, Herrerasaurus, and Pisanosaurus, which was a really early ornithischian, and these were kind of the first kind of dinosaurs really starting to become prominent, and some of the earliest dinosaurs found. So what's really interesting, there has led to the hypothesis that Gondwana or South America is where dinosaurs come from, but I'm a bit hesitant on that hypothesis. Just because we have these sites from here doesn't necessarily mean if we had sites from the same age around the world showing there were no dinosaurs, you could have a hypothesis. But I think a lot of people in paleontology in general just make too many conclusions based off a far too small sample size. But again, that's kind of an opinion rather than a fact, but it's probably something that a lot of people would agree with. But you got to make do with what you have, of course. Sometimes you just have to deal with more sample sizes, of course. So yeah, you can let them run off and do their thing. So next up, we've got another really cool one. We've got Stomatosuchus by Master Dude. So this is a really cool crocodile. Let's actually wait. I want to get a picture or get one of it opening its mouth. Oh, there we are. So here we are. So this is Stomatosuchus, a really, really interesting animal. So Stomatosuchus is known from the type species Stomatosuchus emerus. So this is an extinct Stomatosuchid nidosuchian, so it's a type of crocodile from the late Cretaceous or Cenomanian of Egypt. And much of what we know is actually referred to as a relative Lagosuchus, which is kind of sad. So this was quite a big crocodilian, up there with some of the largest ones like Dinosuchus and Sarcosuchus and Purosaurus. These guys got to about 10 meters long, about 33 feet long. And what really set it apart is that it's very, very long body, as you can kind of see here. You can see very, very long, like jaws as well, and very round as well. Got to about 2 meters long, or about 6 feet 6. And the mandible actually thought to have been toothless, or they had very small teeth, as you can see there, and potentially had, you can see, almost like a pelican-like a throat pouch. And this is believed to be a pouch that they could have used to scoop up fish. They could have very much been hunting almost like how whales do today, baleen whales, but maybe just a little bit more eating bigger fish. But due to its bizarre skull structure, we actually don't know much about what it was actually eating. And sadly, the only known specimen actually considered of a partial skull and 2 vertebrae, and that was collected in Egypt in 1911 by German paleontologist Ernest Stromer, who was on expedition. If you know about Spinosaurus and things like that, you'll know the story. So what happened was it was delivered to the Munich Museum, and that was destroyed by Allied bombing raids in 1944, and currently there's only photographs of the specimen left. But from what we know, we do have a pretty good idea of what the holotype at least looked like. At least we've got some good drawings, though we can't refer to the specimen anymore because it was destroyed. But looking at its habitat, it's very likely it lived in marshy lowlands on the east, what is now the Eastern Sahara Desert, and it may have lived all around North Africa, but we just don't have the sample size to find it. But probably, lived across there, lived in marshy areas, probably filter feeding, maybe similar manner to like humpback whales feeding on small fish. So things like that, maybe even slightly bigger prey. So yeah, really interesting ecology. And we can see there's a couple of skins here. There's the melanistic one. It's got the albino one, but I didn't get it. This is Mississippius. And like the Dinosuchus, so this guy has the land version that he walks around. And then you have the Stomatosuchus in the lagoon. So we'll have a look at that guy. So this is the Stomatosuchus of the lagoon. So you can see they're swimming around your lagoon based on Dunkleosteus. So they swim around and they don't have the extra skins, but they still have some pretty nice skins. Especially this one. I like this one. Very much fits an animal like that. Really, really cool. So yeah, covered that. Anyway, moving on to another one by Master Doot. We've got a paleo edit. So this is going to be of Albertosaurus. You can see, wonderful guy, and of course it does that. Anyway, here is the wonderful Albertosaurus. Came out wonderfully. So this is Albertosaurus, as we know. I'm not going to go too much into its anatomy because, of course, or it's like things like that. We've already gone into that, and you could read it up on the Dinosaurpedia as well. But very much fits the proper anatomy. It doesn't have such that big bulky head. It has, you can see, those crisp but not stupidly so. Also got some kind of little rugosities along the snout there. Very much fits that proper anatomy. A little bit leaner and meaner than your typical T-Rex, but still at a strong bite. You can see with that S-shaped neck. Very much a round body, the pubic boot, long tail. And then you've got, of course, the legs there. This guy was probably a little bit more leaner and meaner than a lot of Tyrannosaurs. Except for probably Alioramus and those kind of relatives of that guy. Very, very cool regardless. Nice edit. Just makes the anatomy fit so much better. It is compared to the skeleton, much rounder body, much smaller arms, much more proper face and everything, much more S-shaped and longer tail, of course, and much better feet. I know I complain a lot about the tails being too short and the feet being too big and bulky. These guys had very bird-like feet, as you can see like there. So yeah, just it tweaks the anatomy to make it fit perfectly. Really, really big fan of it. Even the teeth are right, because a lot of Tyrannosaurs actually have smaller teeth at the front that allow them to... There's been lots of hypotheses why, probably to grab meat, but also potentially even for like grooming and things like that, which is quite cool. So yeah, we're going to let you run off. And then our last one's done by Master Doot. We have got Bistahieversor. So here he is. This is Bistahieversor. We'll have a look at you. You look perfect position for me. Thank you for posing for me perfectly, you guys, today. So, this is Bistahieversor, which means Bishati or Bistahieversor. I'm not good with pronouncing Native American things, but it's called the Bistachie Destroyer, also known as the Bistati Beast. So these guys were a Eutyrannosaurian theropod dinosaur, and is known from the single genus Bistahieversor or species Saley. It was described in 2010. So the first remains of Bistahieversor were a partial skull and skeleton that were described in 1990 as a spilodon, but then there were also more remains in 1992 and also 1998. There were all sorts of different specimens, so we have a much better idea of what it looked like. But then in a 2000 paper, they re-examined all 4 specimens of Australodon, or what was Bistahieversor now, and thought they were actually new species of the Stomatosuchus. But then in 2010, they were like, okay. So they published a redescription, actually gave them a new genus and species name of Bistahieversor saley. So the name Bistahieversor, as I mentioned, comes from the Navajo Bishanti, which means the place of adobe formations, in reference to the Bishar Dinazin wilderness area where it was found, and Aversa, which means destroyer. So its name is the native Navajo, which is quite cool. So in terms of material, both adult and juveniles have been found from the Kirkland and Fruitland formations of New Mexico. Adults would have got to about 9 meters long and weighed up to about a ton, so up there with like the Spinosaurus in size. You can see it's got quite a deep snout. That actually indicates there was a feature not unique to older tyrannosaurs like Tyrannosaurus, so it's quite cool. And geological barriers actually separated these guys a lot from especially the Rocky Mountains. They sort of separated these guys from a lot of northern tyrannosaurs, so these guys kind of evolved in isolation down at the bottom, while the other tyrannosaurs kind of lived at the top more, which is quite interesting. Estimates as well. Some of estimates put a little bit smaller. The most recent estimates of 2016, it was considered to be about 9 meters or just under 30 feet long and weighed about 3 tons, so still a decent animal. So in terms of its classification, it's considered a derived tyrannosaur under the classification of Tyrannosaurinine. It's more derived than things like Tetraphonius, but least derived than things like Lycronax, and actually forms a sister group along with Lythronax, Nunuchosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, Tarbosaurus, and Zuching tyrannus. So it is closely related to those guys. It's considered a little bit more basal in the group. And another cladogram in 2020 suggests to be a basal member of Uranasauria. So it's actually considered now more closely related to things like Appalachiosaurus and Dryptosaurus, and kind of an early relative, early before the Albertosaurus, like Gulposaurus and Albertosaurus, which is interesting. So ecology would not be too different from other big tyrannosaurs. So obviously eating big predators in the ecosystem, eating a lot of smaller things. And yeah, but there was actually a 2020 study that looked at the endocranial morphology of these guys. So actually they seem to have large olfactory bulbs, very similar to other tyrannosaurs, for good sense of smell, and also elongated semicircular canals, so that allowed for good gaze stabilization and more balance. And there was evidence to suggest that tyrannosaurs are actually much more agile than similar sized Gigarodontosaurs, probably because they were hunting smaller prey. They needed to be a bit more onto it with that. But they also had binocular vision, which allowed them to see much better depth perception than a lot of their other dinosaurs, very similar to T-Rex. And it actually showed that these guys had a small optic lobes, which was not actually a strong indicator of whether they had good vision. It just means that they probably just didn't have well-adapted vision compared to like specially adapted vision. They probably just had vision very similar to other dinosaurs, as they probably relied on smell a lot more. But yeah, really, really cool. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of these guys. Definitely came out wonderfully. So, great job for Master Dude, Hawkowl, and Netraptor, and Castlecog, and things like that. Really great mods. I love showing off all these mods, so I hope to see more of you guys in the future, of course. And just like we'll look in here, so this one's sleeping very much similar to the Dinosuchus, sitting around doing its thing. Very, very cute. But anyway, I think this is a great place to end the video, so I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.